Hi, my name is David Dowdy. I own Action Coach Lake Norman, your local training and business coaching firm here in Mooresville. And I am excited to have Tim Martin on the line with us today for the Business Spotlight series. Tim owns Infrasight Software Corporation. And Tim, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Infrasight?
Hi, David. Good afternoon. Great to be with you, and thanks for having me on the program.
Absolutely.
Just a little bit about myself. Live here local to the Mooresville, North Carolina community. Started Infrasight Software in 2017. And my background, really a serial entrepreneur. I've been involved mostly with early stage projects since I got into the space. Was fortunate to catch really the combination, I'd say, of the Apple iPhone and the mobile movement, as well as Amazon Web Services or AWS in terms of cloud, really in the late 2000s, early 2010 time period. Been involved, as I mentioned, a couple early stage projects.
Mhm.
One was very much focused in the early days of mobile apps. So I was very fortunate for 3 or 4 years to be involved with the software development side of things and did a lot of business development with that company, but it was really a crash course from a software perspective, and then proceeded to follow on with another business that was more focused on the infrastructure or hardware side of technology. And there was an overlay of financial markets in that business. And really over the course of probably about 7 years, I had exposure to the full stack of technology. And
Mhm.
I like to credit the fact that I asked a lot of stupid questions for that time, and I became a jack of all trades and felt like I could sit in a meeting with any kind of technologist and at least be conversational.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, Infosight's been in business how long now?
Started the company in 2017.
Okay.
Uh, first year or so, bootstrapped the company myself. We then brought in some friends and family capital and
Yep.
leveraged that model for the first couple of years. And I think we've done now four different financings in the company's history, and really just have graduated from like the early days where you're calling and scraping together checks from friends, truly your friends and family,
Yep.
now to today where we're in the process of raising a strategic round with some, I would say prior to this, mostly high net worth individuals. And now we're moving into more of a strategic financing period where we're working with some of our business partners that can see the interest in our company, and really we'll look to leverage that to do a more institutional financing sometime later this year or early next year.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on the successes you've had. I know a lot of the learnings have come, with a little pain, the ups and downs and all that. But excuse me. So, if you had to do it all over again, just starting over completely, what do you think you'd do differently, knowing what you know now?
Wow, really great question. If I had to start over today, I would say it's all about minimum viable product, particularly in the technology arena. We've gone through the learning lessons a couple times now with a couple different iterations of our platform where we tried to probably just do too much in
Mm,
terms of achieving that minimum viable. Um, and in reality, I would say if we did it all over again, and I'll give you an example. We just did a ground up rebuild of our platform over the last couple of years, and even in this, which was a very refined process, I would have taken it down to an even more simpler level in terms of what we were trying to achieve when we got to that minimum viable product. Because ultimately, that's how you're going to prove your position in a market, even at the most basic fundamental level. So I would say getting to MVP, as a business creator is an absolute necessity.
gotcha. And that may be, the next question I was going to ask, what are some of the key learnings? And that might be one of that key learning process is to refine that process and break it down a little bit further. Um,
Yeah, it's not funny in a literal sense, but I remember conversations we had a couple of years ago when we did this rebuilding of our platform, and have some really smart individuals on my team who have been there and done that before, particularly from the technology or IT side of the house, and they were constantly stressing focus on MVP, minimum viable product.
yep.
And I genuinely would suggest, 2 years ago when we went into this thing, we had it down to our minimum viable product. And fast forward to a couple of years later, it was like, man, if we did that all over again, we would have never have done this or never have done that. So I would say like for anybody, like minimum viable product is like the absolute like smallest thing you can do to prove your concept and prove some sort of value to a customer. However tiny that is, that's what you should be driving towards.
So when you think you're there, go further. Is that right? Break it down.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. In our current platform, we have like four primary dashboard screens, and if we did it all over again, we would have done one, right? And because it took four, it took us longer to get there, and there was more problems that we had to deal with and setbacks that we had to overcome, and it just every problem became more difficult and more extended. And if we did it all over again, we would have proven our concept with one screen and very minimal bare bones and gotten that proof point or validation and then gotten to screen two and screen three and screen four, right? And it's just in hindsight, right, we just, we didn't know any better at the time.
You get to move a lot faster,
That's right.
learn
Yeah.
along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you mentioned you're a serial entrepreneur. You've been through this several times. There's a lot of misconceptions about what it's like to be a business owner. You're going to make tons of money and set your own schedule, have lots of freedom and all that, right? I think those are some of the misconceptions. What are some of the misconceptions that you've come across and deal with? And, what comes to mind when we talk about that?
Yeah, there's probably two things that come to mind for me. The biggest one is and I always advise this to other entrepreneurs and people that want to start their own business. Think about how difficult it could get, and then multiply it by some 10 times or 100 times because it's just always going to be more difficult than you can ever envision. So I would advise someone that you have to make sure you're ready to bear something that's way more difficult than you can ever anticipate getting into. And then the second thing is it's being the CEO and founder, it never shuts off. It's not 40 hours. You may spend 40 hours at your desk or 40 hours working, checking in. But for me, it's, I take this with me when I walk out of my office at the end of the day. Many days it's with me when I'm at the dinner table with my family or on the weekends or Sunday nights. And it's, even if I'm not actively working, it's subconscious with me. And that, that's requires a very unique, it's challenging sometimes to deal with that and compartmentalize and be able to put those things aside. So you need to be prepared for that as well.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. So you've obviously over the recent, 7 years, 6, 7 years you've been doing this, you're reaching some new heights. What do you attribute your growth to in this progression? Is it just grinding it out, or is there something else that comes to mind?
Yeah, in many cases it is a grind. I think for us and for me personally, as being kind of the day one founder and building in my team over time, that grinder mentality ultimately sets a certain culture for the business, which has, I think, led to some of our early success as we've encountered challenges here. I find that the team around me operates and functions very similarly to me when we get in these situations.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is I've come to appreciate that. I mean, building a startup is all about failures, right? And your learning comes from failures. And so it's agonizing, it's painstaking to go through those failures, but ultimately that's how your learnings come from. That's where your improvement comes from. So it's, in some regards, it's having an appreciation for that failure, right? And I
Mm.
always, I never thought about it on a deep level, but more recently, like the whole idea of, failing fast. Like when you're in a startup, you might as well get it over with because you're going to learn a heck of a lot faster, the sooner you can do it than, striving for perfection and failing at a later date,
Yeah.
so those are the couple items I'd say.
Awesome. Well, very encouraging there. So going back to you talking about the grind and the failures and stuff. That's got to weigh on a person. And you mentioned at the dinner table, you often, or the weekends, you're taking work with you. How do you manage that work-life balance to keep your own sanity, your own health, physical, mental,
Yeah,
emotional, and all
yeah,
that?
it's probably the biggest challenge I have, right? Is just finding that balance. makes you have a greater appreciation for things.
Yeah.
Certainly. Children, family. I got 3 kids. I got a fourth kid on the way.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. I find that to be my outlet in many cases.
Yeah.
I will say now at this point, uh, I don't have a difficult time on weekends, right? It's always with me. And I feel like when I have my best weekends, it's when I know that work is going to be with me. So what kind of work am I doing on the weekend? I would say when I started the company, it was like I'm at my desk and I'm putting in the hours and I'm doing things. Now I try and search out outlets where it can be more creative time because I'm not at my desk. I have the ability to think about problems that are with me during the week that, when you're on your computer and you're typing away and you're creating almost busy work that, ultimately needs to get done. But I find that I can solve some of my biggest problems on the weekends because it's this like pressureless pressure, if that makes sense, right? It's like the pressure of the business is still with me, and I'm always mentally working through that. But it's the ability to be outside or doing something else where a lot of my best ideas can be generated, right? And I have these aha moments, so I always try to keep like a note. I have notes on my iPhone that I keep, which are just a collection of my rambling thoughts, and
Yeah.
there's some genius in there, and there's some some duds. But I will say, like I find the weekend, like the work's going to be there, right? So I have to channel it in a way that it's most effective for me because I can't just completely disregard it.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Tim, how do you, I mean, you've obviously got some help with you as you build your company, some employees, some contract. What are some of the attributes that or characteristics that you look for now that you found to be more successful in a team member?
Yeah, I think, and this is a learned skill over time, but I found in the early days of the business, I had to do at least what I felt like was do a lot more micromanaging, particularly in areas where I had no business micromanaging,
Mm.
right? Areas where I'm not an SME or whatever, but for whatever the reason, I felt like, I guess because of the personnel or whomever at the time, that the micromanaging was part of my way of getting the outcome or the deliverable I was looking for. So fast forward that to today, I try and surround myself with a supporting team that I don't have to micromanage. And quite frankly, if we don't have to speak more than once or twice a week, that's a really good thing, right? We're maximizing our time. We can have a quick checkup once a week on an individual level, and maybe we do it on a team level
Yeah.
one other time a week. But generally speaking, trying to find the quality of teammates that don't require handholding and don't require checking up on. And I feel that to be, the most rewarding. And I find that as it's a trigger response because I find it, I get the level of respect and the culture gets generated as a response to the way I'm treating the others in my company. I think they, stick through the difficult times with me because of, I'm not going to micromanage them, and I'm not going to, be overbearing with them, right? And I think that just helps establish a very trustworthy type of culture.
Yeah. So curious on your because you work remotely, your team is remote. Do you lean into things like Teams, or do you do virtual calls? Do you do some
Yeah,
of your
have it heavily relying on Zoom.
okay.
Uh, and it's interesting. Like when COVID happened, it brought.
Oh yeah.
I joke about it now, but we've always been remote. And I feel like what COVID did is it brought forward the technology to support remote work that really was lacking previously. And where a lot of businesses were disrupted because they had to go online. For us, we never missed a beat. We were already very accustomed to it. So it was a net, putting aside everything that ultimately played out there. As a business, it was a net positive for us because it really helped, accelerate our ability to be remote.
Right.
But yeah, it's pretty much Zoom. I mean, we're dependent upon Zoom. I'm on Zoom, several times a day, and then Slack would be the other channel where we,
Okay.
read for communications.
Very good. Thank you for that. All right. So as we're kind of starting to wrap up here, what other words of wisdom or just brilliant nuggets might you share as a serial entrepreneur, somebody that's been at it a little bit now and starting to really enjoy some of the successes and that growth curve? What would you share?
From a wisdom perspective, that's
Yeah,
that's a fully loaded question
yeah,
right
it
there.
is. It is.
I would say that having, as I've mentioned before, surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than yourself is probably
Mhm.
the ultimate key to your success. And it's probably one of the best compliments I've received. Being a company that is mostly investment backed, having some now investors, but prospective investors evaluate the company and actually communicate that. Being able to surround myself with people that are smarter than myself. I would encourage anyone to do that. The other thing is also not surrounding yourself with folks that are going to tell you what you want to hear. Again, part of the frustration process, which is where the growth comes from, but being able to whether it's folks that are on your board or advisory board or on your team, that they're willing to step up and have a voice, and giving them an opportunity for that voice is ultimately where our best work comes from, I feel like.
Fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, you need the hard truth sometimes, right? We all have our blind spots, and we need somebody to help us there to recognize those.
Yeah, it's not fun to go through it, certainly, but I feel like it forces a lot of provokes a lot of thought, and being able to step away and take that feedback for what it actually is a lot of times where a lot of our best decisions or best pivots are made, or whatever the situation may be. Certainly.
Excellent. So, Tim, if somebody wants to reach out or learn a little bit more, research you, what's the best way to find you or find out more about your company here?
Sure. Well, you can find anything you're looking for as far as Infosight is concerned at infosightsoftware.com. Encourage your followers to actually follow us on LinkedIn as well if you're interested in our business news. You can connect with me personally on LinkedIn. If you're in the Mooresville area, I would love to connect or sync up with other business owners and network. And I can be reached by email at any time, obviously, tim@infosightsoftware.com.
Well, fantastic. Again, I appreciate you being part of this and sharing your story, the good, bad, and ugly. It's challenging being in business, especially growing and scaling a business. So congratulations on your successes with Infosight Software Corporation, and look forward to seeing you around town.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Thank you.